Hey, what's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in today's video. Now, today we're gonna paint this scene. Now, if you remember, one of the things that I've been mentioning over the last couple of weeks and months that I'm weak at is proper color matching. Something gets lost along the way. With values, I can do pretty well, but with colors and saturation and the value and vibrancy altogether, something gets lost in the way, and this is what I want to work on specifically today. So without further ado, let's jump into the process. So I'm going to start with the drawing stage. Now, one thing I want you to have in mind, and this is something I always harp on, is whenever you want to improve and actually practice and do an exercise for a specific skill, it's really useful to isolate that. So all you're working on is that thing you want to improve. So what did I do here? I chose a reference photo that, again, is simpler. So a simpler drawing. I don't want to get that too complex. Simple values, just the shapes of the mountain ridges and all of that, so that I can truly focus on the colors. Had I now chosen a really complex portrait with tons of smooth transitions and challenges, it would be very hard to just focus on the color harmony and the saturation and all those things that I really want to work on. Now, it would be possible, but then I'll have to kind of make a mental note or a mental decision not to worry about messing everything else up. Meaning, if anything, what I'm aspiring to achieve here is a good color harmony and saturation, and not to lose the saturation that I see in the reference photo, which is, again, something that very often happens to me, which is why I wanted to work on that in particular. And this scene is also very good for that purpose because it's very clear. You get the very clear oranges and peaches and pinks in the sky versus the bluish mountains. So I really wanted to paint this one in particular. As soon as I saw it, I knew this is going to be a perfect one to work on that skill. So again, a quick reminder, isolate the skill you want to work on. And that's a very good way to do that. If you want to practice drawing, for example, I'd go with a similar reference, honestly, because it's a very simple drawing. So it kind of invites you to draw it. One thing you want to pay attention to, just to give you a quick drawing note, because I barely talked about what I'm doing. Notice how these lines I'm working on right now, the zigzag lines, they're very, very horizontal. And it's a common tendency to see them as diagonal because we understand that these ridges may be moved towards us, and to make them too diagonal. So you really have to curve back that tendency very often. At least that's how I see it and how I see a lot of beginners' common mistakes. So you may not be like that, but I notice it all the time. So pay attention to these things. Make sure not to keep them flat, okay? It's very easy to go way too diagonal. So you see the sky, I'm kind of indicating where the clouds are, the main ones. I don't care much about the transitions of color because that I can just look at the scene and figure it out. I care more about the more major shapes such as the darker clouds, whether they have soft edges or hard edges. Okay, now I'm going to start with the painting stage. Sorry, I forgot to turn on the camera on time, but basically I just applied some gray color to the top, very light, okay, very almost tea consistency, and I'm starting top to bottom. This gray area will help to further bring out the oranges and the reds in the middle, okay? Now, one thing I did say I want to pay attention to is to really keep the color saturation and hue, preferably, meaning the actual color, accurate. So this is what I'm trying to do now. And I did not have an easy time with it for a couple of reasons. First, I think I did get the right colors down at this stage. I mean, you will see in a moment once I put the yellow in. The problem was that first I may have, again, as very often happens, went a little too strong, so I lost some of the lighter values. And another thing, my paper is at an angle which caused the muted gray to fall down too much, and you will see this later on. I should have, in hindsight, flattened the page right now and actually hold it flat. Now, I did also go over the ridges that I wasn't planning on doing that, so I'm lifting back some of it. I was planning on stopping and then continuing with the blue because I didn't want that yellow to show through the blues, but whatever, already happened. The reason I didn't want it to show through is that I would have an easier time putting a blue over a white paper and getting the saturation and the color to look right. But that ship has sailed, so I'm working with what I've got. Here you see me pushing it a little too dark. Okay, now I did realize this, and then I added some water, and I sprayed some water on it. In terms of the color, it is a little better than my usual work. And again, remember, I'm harshly critiquing or judging myself because you have to understand the context of this painting. My goal was to get the right color and right saturation. And unlike opaque mediums where what you mix on the palette is what you get on paper for the most part, unless you dilute them, of course, in this kind of a painting, really, you have to really take into consideration the qualities of the medium. If I'm glazing over yellow, my blue is going to be less saturated and less clear. If I'm going too strong, I can't later on glaze over it with a lighter version of the color. So you have to really prepare for these things. And again, my tendency is kind of to go a little too saturated, which causes things to look darker. So in hindsight, again, what I should have done is start with a very pale, light yellow and very slowly, very gently add more light colors to that. And this is a lesson I learned from this one, and had I not practiced this particular skill, I may have not had gained that insight. By the way, the water reflects the sky, and so you will see me paint that in a moment. And what's beautiful about that is I did get the right thing going in the water. The water actually turned out like I wanted it to. Now you see all of these wet and wets that were meant to put in that cloud, that soft cloud. I didn't really get the timing right on those, unfortunately. And again, the angle of the paper, that was my biggest mistake here. Too much of an angle caused it to fall down below. Okay, so here I am going. This is not saturated enough, so and not warm enough and not clean of a color enough. Sorry, that's the main part. So I went ahead and got some cleaner yellow. So I'm putting it there, and you will see me in just a moment add a bit of red to it because there is a bit of orange there, as you can see. Spraying some water over the top to keep it lighter, because in hindsight I figured already during the process that I went a little too strong there. So here I go with the clear light yellow, adding in a bit of red and orange. That's fine, it's still wet enough. It's definitely not as dark as the top. Plus, I'm going to add some wetter wash to the bottom, and it's going to move and drag the paint down. So that's fine. You see, it's still light. I got it right in that area. It's very tempting to go back and put some oranges and more. I just shouldn't have in the sky. And it's funny how I kind of messed something up right at the start, but I learned my lesson. And this is the power of practicing a specific skill. Now here I went a little too gray. So what you'll see me do soon is take a very pure, clean blue and add that to the bottom. And that really saved the bottom section, as you'll see in a moment. You see it really brought out a lot of the beauty in the orange as well. And I do see that kind of a blue down below. Now at this stage I figured that I'm not really matching the exact hue. So I thought I'll at least put emphasis on saturation and value. Now, just a quick reminder, hue is the actual color. So I got more phthalo type of blue, whereas I should have used a more cobalt, French ultramarine-ish kind of blue. And the lighter the color, the lighter the color, the easier it is to see mistakes in the hue. And that's kind of what happened here, okay? So the lighter sky really showcases, and here I am changing the angle because I figured that was a mistake. So I'm changing it. And notice how much I have to say on the process because I gained a lot of insights. Now, I kept this stage because I wanted to show you just how long I spent mixing, trying to get that blue that I see. I put more of the phthalo blue, more of the French ultramarine. I just couldn't really get it to look the way I wanted, unfortunately. That's something I have to work on even more in isolation. So just to look at a piece of paint and try and recreate it. It's a skill I still have to acquire. I think a couple of isolated practice sessions on that will kind of put me in the right spot. Plus, the colors in this palette, I never took the time to really get to know them. So I'm always winging it when I use this palette. So that's another thing. Knowing your paints can really help with that. Now, notice how much this blue is not saturated enough because it's glazed on top of a yellow. And again, that's my bad from the previous stage. Again, if this was opaque paint, it wouldn't matter. I'll just mix the right blue and put it on top of the yellow. You wouldn't see the yellow, but it's not opaque. That's the reality of the medium. Even the opaque watercolor is still quite transparent. So you always have to think about these things. Now, it's a little too dark. I will lighten it in just a moment. And in the middle there, you can really see the blue pops. And again, I want to remind you, I kind of gave up on matching the hue at this stage. So I am aware that it's not the exact same blue. But I did say, okay, I will try and get the saturation right. So I want to get it as on the scale of black and white, or rather gray to colorful. I want to get it the right amount of colorful, and the value. So how dark or light this is. I have another video on that, and I will link it. I'm going to write myself a note on 1033. I will link to the hue saturation video. It's a useful way of explaining this. So I'm going to add a card here. So notice how when you work on a skill in isolation, it really helps you gain new insight. So even if you make mistakes, which you will, even if you mess things up, which you will, you still learn from it a lot more than if I would just haphazardly painted a lot of paintings. And I'll just say, okay, I'm going to paint a scene. Okay, I'm going to paint another scene. Okay, nothing wrong with that if you're enjoying yourself and that's your goal. But if your goal is to improve a specific skill, at some point you need to say, okay, I'm going to work on this particular thing. Okay, now I'm continuing this mountain ridge because it's kind of similar in value. So I'm going darker, but I'm kind of continuing it. Now notice how with the darker values, it's a little easier for me to get the right color because it's more forgiving. Once you go with darker colors, it's more forgiving. Everything kind of goes closer to black. So I personally find it much easier to match the color as opposed to the lighter colors. Now, another thing I want you to pay attention to, the oranges seem incredibly muted right now. I'm looking at the painting as we speak. It's not as muted. That's kind of my camera, so my bad on that. There's nothing will compare to seeing the painting in real life, unfortunately. So you see it way more gray than it actually is. So have that in mind. I didn't mess up on the saturation as much, but I did to some extent. You see all of these vibrant yellows that are actually light. They're lighter than the orange. Those things, that's why I did this exercise. That's the skill I wanted to improve. And you can see that I have a lot of work to do. Definitely did not get it the way I wanted to. Now, just to mention, to comment about what I'm doing right now, this is a darker wash. I noticed that it has a bit more of a warm kind of feeling to it, so a little more of the quinacridone rose added into the blue, phthalo blue. And the challenge here is getting a dark wash right the first time. I could have used multiple glazes, but I really wanted to just match the colors I see as accurately as I can. By the way, looking at it now, it looks a little more Prussian, just saying. So yeah, again, messed up the hue pretty significantly here. I will have to go back and kind of work on that skill in separation, if you will. And sometimes you won't have the right hue on your palette. That's fine. You will see a French ultramarine, but all you have is phthalo blue, and then you kind of work with what you got. None of that really affects my painting for the sake of painting. Okay, you have to understand. Because I'm working on this in order to improve a skill, I'm harsh. But if I just, a moment later, I'll paint another painting for myself. And by the way, I'm connecting these two mountain ridges. You see I'm not going lighter, even though it is slightly lighter. Again, I'm simplifying the values because that's not the goal. But in any case, like 30 minutes later, I may paint something for myself and be perfectly happy with it. And I'm just trying to give you some mindset stuff. I will be perfectly happy with it and fine with it. And I want you to have that spirit as well of really accepting your results, because you have to kind of accept where you are and work towards improving it if you want to. So yeah, a bit of mindset there. And also, even if I got the values wrong here, the mountain ridge does look kind of too light, but that's fine. The one at the back looks a little too light. I even reversed it and went too dark, or rather darker on this one, as opposed to the one on the left. But in any case, you get my point. Values don't matter as much. Saturation was the goal here. Once I show you this up close and the finished result, it will fall into the right context, and you will see. And plus, once I add some clearer values in the water. Now, one skill I have to work on is glazing.
because I'm still not sure what would happen if, for example, look at the water. They're not saturated enough. Again, some of it is the camera, but they're not saturated enough. What would happen if I go over them with another layer of yellow and orange? Will it improve the saturation? Will it make it worse? That's something it's a skill I need to acquire, basically. And I may, just for fun, go over it again and try to see what will happen once the painting process is done. One more thing I could do is do another one off camera and hopefully improve and then show you the difference between them in a separate video. It is important for me, and once I decide to work on a skill, I really go serious on it because it is important for me. I know this is where I'm lacking. And whatever you lack when you practice a specific skill, you will lack when you practice a larger painting. So I just want to have that range. I want to have that ability to, if I want to, get the saturation more accurately. It is an important skill. And again, I'm not talking about these extreme cases like the car tutorial that I shared recently, where I really push the colors. That's kind of a crutch in a way, because if I just go pure yellow, pure red, pure blue, pure green, it's very easy to see the saturation, but it gets harder once you really try to match what you see, okay? So I do want to get that skill down. Now, one more note. Notice how the bottom part of the water really did a good job in bringing out the lighter section. The bottom darker, kind of dry brush texture works really well with the top section, and it's something that I knew will improve it greatly. What I'm doing now is trying to get those smooth transition clouds darker, because I didn't get them dark enough. And again, value isn't the focus here, but to some extent I did want to improve it. I'm gonna royally mess this stage up. You will see. What happens is, again, I have the paper at an angle, and I shouldn't have. And what happens is, I pre-wet some areas, so the paint moves down, and it actually bunched up at the edge of the area I pre-wetted. And then it was too late to expand that area. So I didn't get the soft edge I wanted. I had to continuously lift back with the tissue. Kind of really messed that section up, but that's fine. In the context of the entire painting, it's okay. And by the way, look how too gray it is. I should have gone way more blue, and I didn't notice at the time. All of these things I didn't notice at the time are things I'm not skilled enough at, and are things I need to work on. And it really makes me laugh whenever people talk about talent. I did this old video on how talent is a myth. I don't really believe it exists to some extent. I think mostly it's hard work. And it's easy to assume that someone had talent when it's just years of practice. And look at it. Like, someone may see my paintings and say I'm talented, but if I'll show you a painting from like 6 years ago, you will see how it was much more amateurish. And if I'll show you this and compare it to something I'll paint 10 years from now in the future, it also will really showcase how amateur I was at this stage right now. So there's always where to aspire, and none of that is really talent. Again, if you're at a point where you kind of are frustrated by results, or you don't feel like you have a chance of improving, screw that. I don't know what else to say. It's not talent. I wholeheartedly believe that it's just skill. You have to continuously practice more and more and more and more and more. That's the only way to improve. And whenever someone says it's talent, it's really laughable. You may have a person that's more visually oriented. There may be something to that, but that can take you only so far. And when I say only so far, you'll still be an amateur if you rely only on that. That's the reality of it. So use this as a reference point in the future, when hopefully I will have improved that skill, and we can revisit this video and go, oh, okay, so yeah, this was a skill I had to acquire and not talent. And I think it's actually really cool that this is documented in that regard, because I will paint something in the future that will nail this, and it could be a completely different type of a scene. It could be a portrait even, and it will nail the saturation. Someone will say, I'm sorry, you're so talented, and I'll say, look at this video in the past where I didn't get it right. So yeah, just my 2 cents on that. Look at how much difference the darker, cooler parts of the water did here on the left section. And now it's time to sign this. I'm going to skip most of the signing stage and show you how I removed the tape, which I also cut out a lot of the fluff, so you can just see me removing the tape, because I got into a bit of trouble removing it. And here we go. This is the final result. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It looks a little more saturated again in real life, but that's the camera for you. Here it is up close. Again, thank you so much for watching. I will do a proper conclusion to this. I think this is a very important video.
So I really hope you enjoyed this one, and here's once again the final result. It is a very important video in my opinion, because it's me working on something I'm pretty weak at, and it's important to make this distinction. Whenever I willfully push the colors and the saturation out of what I see in the reference photo, like that last color tutorial, you really get to see the colors shine and it feels very vibrant and saturated. But when I'm trying to actually match what I see, that's when problems arise. And with these scenes, you know, if I just color match, if I look at a color and try to match it, I can do decently well, but when it's in the context of a full painting, I'm having a much harder time, and I have been struggling with this one as well. And it's just really important to show you this, because A, I'm showing you how I'm practicing, and I'm working on one specific skill, so I chose a very simple scene in terms of the drawing and even the values. It's pretty straightforward because I wanted to just focus on the colors and getting them right, and that's one of the things that is going to be a recurring theme over the next couple of months. You will hopefully see an improvement in it, and it's something I will put a lot of emphasis on in the videos, because values I can do, but colors and saturation, like I tend to go too saturated and then it goes too dark. So it's very counterintuitive in watercolor. It's very different from oils and other mediums where you match the color, you see it, it's opaque on the palette, it's opaque on the paper. Here there's a lot to take into consideration, and it just adds an extra level of challenge. And I hope you'll appreciate seeing this in this video and in future videos. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to subscribe if you still haven't. Leave a comment down below, like this video, let me know your thoughts. It really helps getting this video in front of more people, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. I will see you again in the next vid.